YouTube. Welcome to this DebateCraft politics presentation. This is Max. With me, as always, is Mike. Mike, how's it going?
What's good, brother?
Today, this is an interesting topic. I mean, I feel a little pressured into this. I love discussing this topic, but I've always wanted to have it in kind of a more structured way. Today, we're going to take a casual approach to it. I'm going to let you take it from there. Tell me, what are we discussing today?
Yeah, man, we're doing the Israel-Palestine conflict and kind of broadly hitting on genocide, uh, political news, and everything kind of encompassing that entire event that's been happening over the past few years.
Okay,
This
well,
came.
let me
Let me.
let me stop you there for a moment. Getting a general overview of this. I think we need to talk more than I naturally believe we'll talk about more than what just happened over the last couple of years. But I'll let you kind of touch on it more. So we're going to go over the Israel-Palestine conflict, and you said we're going to hit on genocide. That sounds exciting.
It's definitely going to be exciting, and for you guys to know the reason this came up, it's a topic him and I discuss quite a bit privately. And I was like, let's just let this rip on the channel one time instead of like just doing it in private. I am by no means an expert on this. I am pretty well up to date on news, people's opinions, commentating opinions, broadly what's happening. Max is definitely probably the more person with like hardline opinion for one, but also like more of an expert in the subject matter. And yeah, we're excited to do this. It's a precursor to a larger series we're going to be coming out with. So just being able to hit on this and tie it into an upcoming series, we're pretty excited to do it. I'm broadly just going to be giving him some questions and asking his thoughts and kind of guiding the conversation.
All right. Well,
so excited to see where this goes.
I appreciate that. So, as you said, we do have a series in the future we're going to release on this. In the near future, this topic, we have a DebateCraft special series we're making. So, I'm very excited for that. This is going to be a casual discussion on this. As Mike said, he's going to ask me some questions, and I'm going to answer them, and I hope he'll push back against my answers as much as possible. So, this is as much a discussion as a debate, but we'll see where that goes, and we're just going to wing it from there. So, Mike, I guess we'll start wherever you want to start. What is your first comment, question, or challenge for me in this topic?
Yeah, let's start with the easy one. Is this a genocide?
If you mean is this, and I assume you're talking about the most recent war in Gaza, where during a ceasefire period on October 7th, the Palestinians, led by, let's frame this as Hamas attacked Israel on October 7th. Israel's retaliation for that, which is ultimately rescuing its hostages, is that a genocide? That is your question when you say
Yeah,
this?
easy question, right?
Yes, the obvious answer is no. A war in which there's an unfortunate large amount of collateral damage still does not equal genocide. The logic you would have to use to reach the conclusion that this was a genocide would be the same logic you would have to use to say America committed genocide against Germany in World War II or Japan in World War II, or basically any other population that they've attacked in any recent wars, Iraq or the Vietnamese, any war, because there's a lot of collateral damage. Israel is fighting against an enemy in which it is not really, how do you say this nicely? Israel is a modern, sophisticated military against a very not modern, not sophisticated enemy. It is very easily Israel could actually commit a genocide, and it does not because that's not its goal. So, no, it is not a genocide. The numbers are terrible. Any civilian death is awful. I think that anybody can agree. We look at those numbers, and it's bad. Israel, however, has a moral obligation to do what it can to save its own citizens as hostages. I mean, even let me just say this way: Israel has a obligation to save its citizens that are hostages. Hamas could have released those hostages on day one and saved all those civilian lives of its own people. Hamas's goal is not the protection of its civilians. I think that much should be very obvious. Hamas gains politically the maximum number of its own people are dead. Israel goes out of its way to avoid casualties. Otherwise, you would see tons more. I mean, Israel could literally commit a genocide overnight. You just carpet bomb the whole place and the whole population is dead. Clearly, that's not its goal. I'll leave it there. The answer is no, it's not a genocide.
Can I make two assertions and just get your opinion on them?
Sure.
Would you say that you agree that Palestinians on a broad level, typically, I'm not saying all, typically despise the Jewish state in Israel?
Yeah, I would say it is culturally an obligation for the Palestinians to dislike Israel, and it is culturally an obligation to resist the existence of Israel as a state. So, yes, it is ingrained culturally. I mean, it's part of the education. In the way the ABCs are in education in kindergarten in America, or most countries, hating Israel and resisting its existence is education for Palestinians, yes.
Would you say Israel has the same type of viewpoint toward the Palestinians, like where both of them are at odds and equally despise each other?
No, I don't think Israel's culture does not necessarily require that the Palestinians not exist. No, I don't agree with that. Certainly, I am going to point. You can point to the extreme right in Israel and say that to some degree. They have some viewpoints I very strongly disagree with. The moderate and left of Israel, no, coexistence is clearly their goal. Because, or I'll just leave it at that. If we're not pointing to extremes in Israel, no, coexistence is fine. You don't have to point to extremes in Palestinian society to point to that extreme. You just look, the average Palestinian is engaged in a resistance to the existence of Israel. This is not an extreme point of view. Their government, which is widely supported, literal platform is like, we ran on a platform of resistance to the existence of Israel. The Israel must be destroyed. From the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. That means free means lack of Jews. It does not mean free. Any country that exists would not be suddenly some utopia for women or religious freedom for minorities and all that. Clearly that's not what would happen there. It means free of Jews. That is what that ethos stands for.
So do you think you're saying it's not a standard practice of Jews to just hate Palestinians? Do you think, let's say, I'm gonna take this from two different stances, like people inside the government right now, like under Netanyahu, and even like civilians inside of the West Bank, do you think there's a general like stance where most of Israel, or at least a good portion of it, is anti-Palestine? And I'm asking that just to frame it because I think most people can agree that Palestinians do not love anything in Israel. They feel like it's their land. I guess the point that I'm trying to frame is inside the government and generally in the populace. I think that kind of goes both ways, right? Like the defense minister, I forget what his name is Yoav, maybe. I'm having God, I wish I had some notes.
I can answer this question without you getting into the specifics. There are going to be, so Israel is a sophisticated modern democracy. Within a democracy, you're going to have a little more complexity than you do, say, in a one-party dictatorship you do in among the Palestinian society. In Israel, you're going to have right-wingers who believe in some kind of kooky manifest destiny nonsense. I think every Jew and every Israeli has an obligation to condemn those type of beliefs of greater Israel and we must have total domination. I think any credible person would argue that that's not acceptable. And I do believe every Jew and Israeli has an obligation to condemn the awful behavior of like West Bank settlers that engage in violent and illegal behavior. So if you're asking that, yes, I can immediately point to extreme actions of the Israelis and the far right and say, yep, I condemn that behavior. That's not something I would agree with. And say that, yeah, that's not the norm, nor should it be the norm. And if it is the norm for them, then yes, I condemn that. That's not what you, yeah. So I guess I'll leave it there. But I'm just saying this is not the center of the society which would necessarily look to coexist.
Yeah, maybe not the center of society. It's kind of hard to frame it, but you do, judging from that response, then you do take issue with some of the remarks from the Netanyahu government, correct? Like they're calling Palestinians animals, or they're essentially calling them not humans, and they all the remarks that came out.
I don't need to equivocate or deny this. Anybody who says that, or first of all, I disavow any of those remarks. Anybody who says that, fuck you. I disagree with that. Palestinians deserve all of the necessary humanity and everything to just survive in a normal world. With great respect and with understanding of humanity in general, Palestinians deserve to have a normalized relations with the world and in their own society. So anybody who's calling them animals or saying they don't deserve rights and all this stuff, fuck them. I will say that the best way to support Palestinians is to stop supporting the Palestinian cause, of which is to deny the existence of Israel and to resist its existence. That cause is not working, and it is causing the Palestinians a lot of pain, and they will never have a normal society without abandoning the existence of Israel, abandoning the resistance to the existence of Israel. That plan is not working. You're not one day away from finally defeating Israel. I'm sorry. Just abandon that plan.
So can we go into kind of the UN's opinion on this and some of other, I guess, human rights organizations? Do you think a bunch of at least I would imagine at this point, you may agree that a large portion of the world would consider Israel like an apartheid state. Do you think that is accurate?
No, because the assumption of a apartheid state is that they are keeping out of its country certain groups. So which group is that? Is that Arabs or Muslims? Because I think 2 million people in Israel are Arabs and Muslims. If you mean like Palestinians, which are distinctly a group trying to resist the existence of Israel, yeah, I mean they do have like borders and a blockade against people who are necessarily calling for their death. Yeah, in the same way that America has border controls and keep apart people who are trying to destroy it. Yeah, yes, but that's not what an apartheid state means. That's just a political hot button term to use to demonize Israel, which is overwhelmingly the majority of countries in the world and the UN. So it doesn't have credibility as a neutral arbiter here. In the same way that people criticize America for that. Yes, America is not neutral in its position. It is going to take the side with the moral high ground in one liberal democracy in the Middle East. Yes, America is not neutral on agreeing with that country. So the UN does not have credibility. Those organizations don't have credibility. If you're going to call like collateral damage in a war, which is very unfortunate, my heart breaks for every innocent civilian dead, you're going to call that genocide. Yeah, you don't have credibility.
Do you think on a broad level, because I think you've answered this briefly, but I just want to touch on it more because an apartheid kind of ties into displacement and essentially keeping a certain populace out. You don't think any of that's going on in Israel, especially inside of the West Bank, like people getting displaced religiously over there by a large number of Jewish people? Like, are there Muslims being displaced in the West Bank to a level that's kind of disturbing, at least?
Yes, so I have a very big problem with all of that. This needs to be negotiated in peace dreams. I don't like this settlement thing. It's probably one of the biggest sticking points for me. Peace needs to happen so that we don't have this continual buffer zone being created, which is largely what they would view that as, the Jews in the West Bank. And all this nonsense needs to stop. Yes, it is hardly a catalyst for the issues, but yes, it is a large one in terms of negative optics of this. So all that needs to be dealt with. If you're tying that to, is it apartheid? No. I mean, Israel has borders. It's allowed to allow in whoever it wants, and every country is allowed to determine who its citizens are and who aren't its citizens. I mean, Israel gets to decide that, and certainly Palestine gets to decide that. Jordan gets to decide that. Jordan gets to have, Palestinian concentration camps there to make sure that Palestinians aren't its citizens because it needs to maintain a internal army of Israel resistors. So, yeah, to the extent that that exists, I think Israel has some complex issues that manifest in the West Bank, and I hate it, and I wish that stuff wasn't happening in the West Bank, but it is a reality of the circumstance as a result of the eternal resistance to the existence of Israel.
So let's tie this back into the war, because I think you've said broadly that war is bad and civilian casualties are unfortunate. But you would agree that Israel's primary focus in this war is the annihilation of Hamas, which is probably unrealistic in some way just because of how Hamas operates. Let me ask it this way. I'm going to play a psychological game with you. If you had a button in front of you and you could push it and it just eliminated all of Hamas, but it did so at the cost of demolishing Gaza and disproportionately killing like 90 to 100% of the Palestinian population, if that was a war goal and that can be accomplished, do you think that's a realistic outcome?
No.
Like what?
No, hell no.
What degree? Okay, I'm asking this to frame because it's like to what extent does this war go on where Israel's not going to accomplish its goal, but it keeps pushing in to try to achieve it while drastically harming civilians?
Let me answer that question. So your first question is, if you could kill Hamas, but it's going to kill all the civilians, innocent civilians in Gaza, would you do it? No. The answer is fuck that. That is exactly the framing of this that Israel is already accused of doing. And if Israel wanted to do that, it absolutely could. It could easily, it has modern, sophisticated weaponry against like a non-modern army. So it could easily do that, and it could have done that in day one and saved all of its soldiers and not had to go through the hassle. It would have lost some civilians, but it certainly would have won the objective of Hamas being the end. So no, I just want to make that clear. The other thing is, sorry, go ahead.
I want to tie into a point with this because I think it's important, because you're saying they have the capability to do it. I agree, but I don't think they have the ability to do it. Like, could Israel?
No, they don't have the moral ability to do it. As a moral actor, Israel doesn't want to just kill 5,000 civilians for every Hamas, agent it takes out, a Hamas official or military.
Yeah, playing the cynical person here, even if they wanted to do that, right? Like they thought this was an appropriate engagement where they could just literally delete a terrorist group constantly on their borders. Like there is too much political pressure for them to be able to do that.
No, no, no,
Do
no,
you
no, no, no.
think?
No, that your framing of that isn't correct. The majority of the world already believes Israel is like a genocidal asshole that just lives in the Middle East there. At least the civilian populations, whose governments are a little different. If Israel actually wanted to do that, it could, and it would. It would be done in a week. I mean, you just carpet bomb the whole place. I mean, it has nukes. Obviously, they did not have, but you just nuke the area. Hamas is gone, and you just killed a whole lot of civilians. If Israel actually wanted to do what they're being accused of, it could easily do that. But Israel doesn't want to do that, and it's difficult because Hamas, for every militant, has figuratively speaking, 10 civilians around it, making sure that they're like, oh no, you can't get me. I've got a bunch of innocent civilians around me. That is their military defense tactic. Israel builds a iron dome to prevent itself from rockets as a specific military defensive thing, and they basically build a dome of toddlers that Israel has to kill each, militant. So that is what we're talking about. We're not on an equal level moral playing field here. So your question of if Israel would do that, would it do it? No, it wouldn't, because it could, and yes, it still does not do that because it is not actually guilty of what it's being accused of.
I mean, not that I fully disagree with it. I just think like the opinion that they could do it. I think there's too much political, not just from the U.S.
Wait, which country, which friend are they at risk of losing? Okay, yes, the U.S. Nobody would morally agree with doing this, but it's not like they're suddenly at risk of losing the world's moral goodwill against it. They have no moral goodwill in the world. For the most part, the Western societies and parts of Europe kind of accept him, but they're condemned constantly. I agree that, let's just say that if they actually did do something like that, yes, I think the world would be like, okay, we can stop feigning some interest in the Palestinian cause and actually finally really condemn Israel. I guess maybe Egypt or Jordan or something. We're like, yeah, I guess we really have to condemn Israel now rather than just saving face for these populations we're pretending to care about. Yeah, I guess that's true.
I guess I'm tying this all into kind of like Israel has motivations to be inside of Gaza, specifically Netanyahu, right? Like the war, not saying they did not have a right to defend themselves. I am the first person, when the tragedy happened, I absolutely thought they had the ability to defend themselves and should go in and do whatever they had to do.
If you're going to ask a political question, does prolonging this prolong Netanyahu's political career? Yeah, absolutely. I'll agree with that. I am not going to... Look, to me, Netanyahu and Hamas, both of them, we cannot say Hamas is the reason for the continuing thing. Like most Israelis and people will say, yeah, if we only get rid of Hamas, I am not foolish enough to believe that either Hamas or Netanyahu are the catalyst or the genesis for any of this. Hamas just happens to be the thing that happens to be the issue now, and Netanyahu, you can point to him if you're anti-Israel. Oh, look at Netanyahu's the devil, and blah, 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 if it wasn't for Netanyahu. No, both of these are, at this particular moment in history, are the actual things. But no, this goes on long. It's much bigger than Hamas. It's much bigger than Netanyahu. It's the existential the rejection of the existence of Israel, which is now manifested by Hamas, and Netanyahu being the right-wing manifestation of the Israeli citizens recognizing there's no partner for peace. So, yay, Netanyahu, go defend us, even though I think they would love to have some, just kind of peacenik liberal guy in there, but they can't because you have an existential threat at your doorstep, and they're not shy about saying it. Death to Israel is the Hamas slogan. That is their... lower taxes in America for some political campaigns, death to Israel for Hamas.
Yeah, and to clarify, I absolutely think Hamas is deplorable and a terrorist group. It's not I know different people, Hassan and Asman, have chimed in on this. I am not a pro-Hamas person. I've seen Hamas get justified as it's just part of the government. It's just not. Hamas is a terrorist group that should be annihilated. I guess my question is knowing how they operate and the fact that they operate literally taking advantage of children, taking advantage of civilians. Israel has literally bombed hospitals to try to be able to get to them. They have just massive civilians areas and human rights. I guess the UN's calling it human rights violations where they're not even allowed to have aid or food inside of there because the excuse is Hamas is using it to prolong the war. So Israel's starving civilians and unintentionally or intentionally, I guess, however you view it, right? Okay, we're not going to allow food in here because it's just going to be commandeered by Hamas, but at the expense of starvation and all the other human rights violations that are supposed to be happening. At what extent does this go on that it becomes too much? You're saying the goal is to kill Hamas. If it keeps operating like this, is there a point where you stop it and just realize, okay, we are not going to be able to beat Hamas to the point that it's not functional? Because if they could, they would have already. At what point do you stop it?
Okay, so you said a few things there. One, a hospital becomes a defensive military. I mean, becomes a military target when it's like shooting missiles out from it or rockets or whatever, and it's housing military. So, like, it's unfortunate that you're using civilian infrastructure, but just to be fair to, oh no, Israel's attacking hospitals. Well, it's attacking hospitals filled with Hamas rockets. You mentioned the aid thing. Israel would like to feed its enemy, its stated enemy, and keep them well fed so that it's just not starving to death. But I mean, it's also fighting its enemy, so it can't. And while pausing fighting its enemy to feed its enemy, and I don't know in any war that's a thing. But Hamas does steal that food to use it, to make sure that its civilians are in line and making sure to do the one goal, which is to fight Israel rather than, the unintentional consequence of losing a war and peace might break out. So yes, Hamas has to keep that maintained. And then your question of how much is too much? It's too much. The war needs to end. It's like Hamas on day one, like, oh yeah, okay, we captured these people. Let's give them back. Because what was the goal here? You can say that the war did not start on October 7th. That I agree. Yeah, the war didn't start on October 7th. But what does Hamas, what do the Palestinian gains from the action on October 7th? It is obvious what happens on October 7th. The only possible thing that could happen is Israel fights a war for the next 2 years, kills a lot of innocent civilians unintentionally or intentionally. It's inevitable because it's a war in a urban area to get back his hostages. This was inevitable. This is a calculated thing by Israel's enemy, Hamas. There was no other thing. Did October 7th suddenly, there was no going to be a headline next day. After October 7th, Israel says, okay, you know what? I guess we're giving up. I guess we'll just get run out into the sea. I mean, there was no possible moral gain. There is no moral equation that makes October 7th okay and works out for the Palestinians. It works out for Hamas because the world condemns Israel shortly after, because in an attempt to get back its hostages, it unnecessarily has to lead to collateral damage. So how much is too much? Day one was too much. The first civilian killed by Israel and an unfortunate collateral damage was too much. At this point, I mean, there's some kind of optic pseudo ceasefire going on that'll lead to just retaliation back and forth forever, like for the last 50 years. So is it too much? It's all too much. I would like to see Israel is not allowed to absolutely annihilate its enemy like in every other history of the world war, because you have just this, I don't know what to call it, like psychotic flailing toddler that can get a hold of rocks and fling them at a modern sophisticated military. So Israel has to kind of knock this psychotic toddler over occasionally. Like, okay, stop. Like, you're not going to win. I hate to say that about Palestinians because it's absolutely abhorrent and it breaks my heart. You have a people who are just absolutely in the worst possible condition. Just look, it's not going to happen. You're not going to. Israel's not collapsing tomorrow. You're not one day away from the death of Israel. So please, we're brothers. Let's just make peace and accept that that's a possibility. It's too much.
Yeah, I mean, it's unfortunate. I guess the hatred on, you would say toward the Palestinians, toward Israel, I would say probably on both sides. I guess to tie this up and just to make sure we keep the debate within discussion within the proper time limits, we both kind of agree the treaty or the ceasefire is like a non-starter. It's just something that's going to go away after a period of time, as it always has. What do you think is the broader solution to this? Because like Hamas is not going to stop doing Hamas things, and for Israel to be able to wipe them out, it's going to be at the cost of civilians, infrastructure, public hospitals, different things, everything that's happened so far. How do you see, and this is going to be a pretty direct question, I guess, do you think there's a way for this part of the world to actually find peace, or are we stuck in a place where both Israel and Palestine are just so at odds with each other and hate each other enough that one of them's eventually going to take the other one out? Do you think there is the possibility to peace? And if you think there is the possibility of peace, even removing Hamas from the equation, just Palestine's general opinion of Israel and Israel's general opinion of Palestine, what is the fix to this in your opinion?
Well, there is. I mean, I'm kind of heartened to the fact that there is a possibility for peace, because as time goes on, fewer and fewer of the surrounding countries pretend to care about this. So right now, like Egypt has its own things going on. Saudi Arabia is a big one. Jordan isn't really pretending very much either. The Palestinians are a kind of de facto refugee eternal army fighting Israel. Like they are created as a eternal refugee group, unlike any other in history, to just fight Israel forever. But as time goes on, I mean, they don't have support of any of the countries because Israel won those wars. You can only fight Israel's existence through asymmetrical warfare, that being the entire existence of Palestinians. I mean, look, they are a people, they exist, and we can go into a lot of the history of this and the, I don't know, nativism arguments and all of that stuff. But the reality is that the Palestinians not accepting the existence of Israel is what continues to make this continue. As the countries surrounding Israel stop pretending to care about this issue as like Israel can't exist because it displaced a former country of Palestine or some other such thing like that, it leads itself to less and less credibility for this movement, and more people looking into like what is a thing that can happen to manifest in peace happening. So that's a good thing. Iran being the funder of this largely kind of dwindles away further. This just manifests as a convenient way to say in these countries of like, don't look at the fact that you don't have any freedom and that your standard of living isn't very good. Oh, look at Israel. Israel is your problem with everything. So that becomes less and less of an issue. Over time, I do believe we'll just see it become less and less with large events like October 7th happening, Israel retaliating, being condemned by everybody as a pariah state, and then people going back about their business, accepting Israel as a modern democracy in a place that otherwise is kind of bleak. And then I think over time, perhaps, I'm hopeful that the Palestinians will abandon the Palestinian cause, agree to just live side by side with Israel, and will just have a Palestinian state that exists as a normal, I don't know, whatever. But it can be whatever kind of state it wants to be, just not one that's fighting the existence of Israel forever, because that's what it is right now. And then hopefully that'll happen. So it's possible. Otherwise, yeah, we'll just see a forever war with Israel kind of holding its enemy at arm's length, because if Israel wanted all the land, it could certainly take all the land. If Israel wanted to kill all the Palestinians, it certainly could easily kill all the Palestinians. So all the things it's accused of are obviously not true. However, if the Palestinians got their way and tried to, kill all the Israelis, which was their, they can't do, and they were prevented from doing on October 7th. And clearly, that was the goal. The agendas of each side are very clear. I think that hopefully, just to wrap up that answer, we will just over time see the bite become weaker and weaker until there's just no choice. But like, okay, I guess Jews. I guess you get to live here. Have a nice day.
Yeah, it's such a broad topic, and as we mentioned, there's so many different points that we didn't even get to touch on, like the U.S., Israel, Iran, Palestine proxy war is a whole nother 30 minutes probably to discuss.
Well, do you want to ask me some like history questions? You want to ask me like doesn't Palestine belong to Palestinians? That's a good question.
I think what we do is, for the people that are interested, is check out that series that's coming up, because we totally could rant on this for 2 or 3 hours. We do have a series that's going to cover all that. And this should be able to tie into that, but this is just a precursor to where Max is going to be going back and forth with another person who is pro-Palestine, or at least somewhat pro-Palestine, given some of the recent events, and probably is a lot more articulate and educated on the topic that I am. Really, it's going to be sway my opinion and sway your opinion. So we're excited to launch that series. And overall, I think it was just a pretty decent conversation. So thank you for engaging in this.
So I appreciate that. Thank you for your good questions, Mike. If anybody thinks this was more one-sided than it should have been, it's absolutely the intent. I absolutely very passionate about this topic, and it was a little one-sided. Mike was not going to argue with me on the finer details of that. We have a series called Israel on Trial. It's going to be very exciting. We're going to really scrutinize every single argument I just made, and we're going to very carefully look at all of the minutia and the history and each argument you can make. It's called Israel on Trial. It'll be coming to this channel soon. We are excited to show you that. Thank you so much for listening to this discussion. Like, comment, subscribe. Thank you so much.